We're talking Washington Commanders on the Our Football Network, Our Football YouTube channel. And we're going to get into the Washington Commanders offseason, which, like a lot of other teams, will be kicking off real shortly with free agency. And then obviously the draft will be in about a month and a half from now. Check out to get ahead of that. The Our Draft Guide will be out April 7th, so you can get this sent to your home, wherever you want it sent. You got a PDF as well option. But this is the Our Draft Guide. This is the 2024 version. Check it out. We've got 32 team needs and data here that basically is part of why I like to have these discussions with analysts like Dave. So check it out. The Our NFL Draft Guide, link in the description for that, as well as link in the description to find out everything about Dave and how he covers the Washington Commanders, as well as on his Locked On Commanders podcast, which is 5 days a week. So really happy that he's taken out his busy time with the combine now officially over to join us here today, Dave. So always enjoy having these chats.
Yeah, man, I appreciate the invite as always.
All right, so let's start with the obvious, the big deal, the Deebo deal. Looked like a pretty good deal if you're a Washington fan. Low pick. The cap space was there. Seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, really just kind of elevates the offense. When you look at Deebo Samuel and what he can potentially bring to the offense, as the rotation of number 2 receiver went through last year for the Commanders, they never really had that kind of solidified guy. Deebo could be that solidified guy, but he could also be just, kind of a third option, honestly, as the receiver group goes for Jayden Daniels behind Terry McLaurin, because there's nothing that says just because you add Deebo Samuel this offseason that you can't go draft a guy or you can't go sign a free agent or whatever. So 100%. It really doesn't trap the Commanders into anything, even with the $17.5 million off the salary cap.
Yeah, I mean, his injury history is definitely a part of that, is that you can't just rely on coming back with the same room as last year. If something were to happen to Deebo, this team is right now on the cusp with a generational quarterback, and you have to give him all the weapons as possible. So let's go ahead and start with that. Let's go into free agency and start on offense, because one of those weapons, matter of fact, there are about 6 of them that decisions have to be made on. Not a lot of guys that must be back, but Zach Ertz seems to be one of those guys. I know where he is at this stage of his career. I don't anticipate he's going to be playing football much longer. So is this a no-brainer kind of deal? And they also have the other tight end, Bates, as a free agent.
Yeah, I mean, Zach said that he wants to continue playing, and one thing that we talked about him, extensively during the season is his desire that he had to play for Cliff Kingsbury coming into this last year, and how much of a connection there was there. So it just makes all the sense in the world that Zach would want to come back, and he would want to come back to Washington. And, it's not going to cost a ton of money. I feel like, there's plenty of off seasons where I've dealt with teams where they've got these veterans who are kind of at the end of their career. And basically what they do is they tell them, go re-sign who you need to re-sign, go sign whatever free agents you need to bring in, trade for guys you need to bring in. And then once all the dust settles before the draft, we'll sit down, we'll talk about a number, and we'll get this deal hashed out. It's not about, getting the biggest paycheck in the world. It's about allowing the team to do what they need to do to build the infrastructure and then allow that veteran to continue being a part of it. So I feel like Zach will be back. I feel like that's a guy. John Bates is interesting because, as much as you love a guy like John Bates and a locker room guy and all that stuff, you also need to pave the way for Ben Sinnott to go ahead and elevate his game and have an opportunity to contribute more. And, does John Bates really want to be relegated to that third tight end position if you do bring Zach back and Ben climbs the depth chart a little bit? So that's a conversation they all have to have, together. But you'd love to see, honestly, the entire room back together if you could.
This being a really deep and talented tight end class, do you see any way that even, let's say they we're at draft time, they have not re-signed either Bates or Ertz, and like you said, Ertz might still come later on, but they decided to pass on Bates. Do you think that tight end would be a position that they would look at, not early, but at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you don't bring back Zach Ertz and you don't bring back John Bates, then you have to. Ben Sinnott, as much as you love the potential there and you love the little bit of work that he got in his rookie year, and the projection is great. You can't just sit there and rely on that alone. So you absolutely have to go out there and add to the room, especially when you consider, behind Ben right now on the 2025 roster without Zach and without John is Cole Turner, who's a guy that we know can catch the ball, good receiving tight end, but lacks severely in the blocking game. And that's, the reason he's been a practice squad guy and really hasn't gotten a whole lot of regular season opportunity.
Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about those wide receivers then. Zacchaeus seems to be near the top of that list, but De'Ami Brown finally broke out. Noah Brown is an interesting vet as well. What do you think out of those top three? Who is the receiver that the team would like to bring back the most?
Yeah, I think Noah Brown is an interesting option. He's got an extensive injury history himself. He actually came to the team dealing with an injury, was traded from the Houston Texans, was brought over from the Houston Texans, right at the beginning of the season. So it took him a little bit to get going, and then he had the kidney injury there towards the end of the year and was unable to come back from that. So even despite all that, as receivers go, he was the second receiver in the stat box. So obviously a guy that was very productive with Jayden Daniels and certainly still has some potential. Not the oldest guy in the world, not the youngest guy either, but he's kind of in between there. De'Ami Brown, you love what he saw out of him down the final stretch, especially in the playoffs. The question is, how much can he turn that into consistent regular season performance? You wouldn't mind seeing them bring him back on a 1 or 2 year deal to be able to kind of prove that. And then Olamide Zacchaeus, he's a guy that I got to know pretty well during the last season. Would love to see him back from a locker room standpoint. The question really is, do you need another guy that kind of does what Deebo does? Because obviously Deebo is going to be the primary guy doing that short game work and all that kind of stuff. And OZ, what does he bring to the table outside of that? Or do you want just another guy who does that? That's a question that Adam Peters and the staff will have to figure out. But, there's clearly a case to be made for all three. But I think, of the three, personally, I'd probably bring Noah Brown back first because he's got the most consistent career performance when he's healthy.
Okay. The offensive line, really, Lucas is the one that sticks out with all of his experience. He will be 34 in July. Is this, and I don't think there were many offensive lines in the NFL that were healthier in the regular season than the Washington Commanders. But what do you think about Lucas as, a valuable part of that rotation?
Yeah, you love to bring Cornelius Lucas back, as that swing tackle, that veteran mentor to Brandon Coleman last year. The most impressive thing about Luke is that, during all the rotation in and, you're going to take a series, Brandon's going to take a series, you'll take another series, all that stuff. It never phased him and never, he never flinched and never got under his skin or anything like that. And I think that's really what you want in a teammate in a depth tackle. So I think that, if you can bring Cornelius Lucas back, if he doesn't think he can go somewhere and try to get a starting job elsewhere, then he's absolutely a valuable guy to bring back. The question really becomes, what's the offseason strategy for the tackles, just in general, because if you're going to target a tackle early in the NFL draft, then that potentially moves a guy like Andrew Wiley down the depth chart a little bit. And now you've got Wiley and Lucas as backup tackles, and which one you're going to bring in first and their big sets and all that stuff. So again, those are some of the back office politics of it and everything else. But I think that, getting to know all these guys over the last few years, none of them seems to be all that, selfish when it comes to demanding snaps. But at the same time, everybody wants to play, right? You don't practice to watch the games, you practice to play. So we'll have to see how they can balance all that up.
I know Washington has a lot of money, so cutting guys isn't really going to be a priority. But if you can save money, you can save money. If they decided to bring back Lucas in any way, and they were going to zero in on a tackle in the draft, a high pick in the draft, would that at all mean that they might be looking at saving money with Wiley, or are they completely happy with Wiley and then they got enough money and they're not even going to go there?
Yeah, I mean, never say never, right? But there's no indication right now that that's a path
Okay.
that they could be looking to take. But you never know if the right free agents or the right trade options come available and it costs them enough money and they feel like they can replace Wiley 1-for-1 and also bring in this other veteran via trade that they think can help them better, then certainly never count it out, right? But I don't get a vibe that that's in the plans, I would say.
Okay. And overall, as far as the line, I mean, it looked like, Cosme is like the top lineman on the team. But the other guys, I know you got the rookie, but for the most part, everybody looked like they were okay. I mean, it was a solid line. It wasn't great, but it was solid. It was okay. I mean, was there like a specific player outside of Cosme or player or two besides the rookie that you feel that the team is real happy with as a veteran, or do you think that they're really going to be looking to upgrade at a few of those spots in the offensive line if they could, and if not, then they'll bring everybody back as is?
Yeah, I think the biggest question really is the tackle. How much do you love Brandon Coleman at left tackle? How much do you I think that he might be serviceable at right tackle, and then just what the options are, right? Like the great thing about Adam Peters and the way that they're going to build this roster is they're not going to force anything. So they're not going to come into the offseason saying, we got to move Brandon to the right side. We got to bring in a left tackle. No, like if the right left tackle is there, that inspires them to move Brandon over to the right side and maybe compete with Andrew Wiley, they'll do it. But if the right guy is not there, then they feel comfortable with who they have and the progress that they'll make, and then getting another year of training camp and all that stuff under their belt to kind of help out. And what certainly helps out there is a guy like Jayden Daniels. The Commanders' offensive line was actually one of the highest when it comes to giving up pressures, but they were one of the lowest when it comes to giving up sacks, because you have a quarterback like Jayden Daniels who can turn pressures into nothing, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you have a guy like that gives you a little bit more ability to do that, takes a little bit less pressure, or takes a little bit of pressure off to go find a blue chip, offensive lineman. I know a lot of people think Ronnie Stanley to the Commanders makes a lot of sense, and certainly maybe it could. But the Commanders aren't going to be in a position where they feel like they have to go break the bank and win a bidding war to get Ronnie Stanley just because they absolutely have a desperation need at that position.
Do they like Mariota? Do they want to bring him back?
Yeah. I mean, everybody loves Marcus Mariota. You know what I mean? He's a dude who came in there, was a true mentor to the young quarterback. I mean, he was signed before the NFL draft last year and came into his initial press conference with us talking about playing the role as a mentor. You know what I mean? Like, he knew before Jayden even got in the building, that was basically where he is in his career, and that was his job, and he was great at it. Always prepared to be a starter. When he got into games, he was always prepared. And that's exactly what you want out of a veteran backup quarterback. So, if he doesn't come back to Washington, it's not going to be because anybody in Washington doesn't want him back.
Okay, let's talk about free agents on defense. And it's interesting because you have at each spot, you got Fowler, who led the team in sacks, Wagner led the team in tackles, and even Chin, who did a nice job, was second in tackles. So all three are free agents. Also, of course, the nickel back a free agent as well. So again, they have the money. So do you believe that all three of these guys are going to be back more than likely?
So I think Bobby Wagner's going to be back. The question mark really is Jeremy Chin. You know what I mean? What does the market look like for him? Safeties historically, at least, more recently, I should say, in recent history, have been kind of woefully undervalued and underpaid and all that stuff. Are the Commanders going to come through with an offer and a deal for him that makes him feel like he's respected enough and valued enough that he doesn't even need to hit the open market? Or is he going to hit the open market, and what does that do to his number? And does he potentially price himself out of the Washington Commanders organization? I know Jeremy really appreciated everything that the coaching staff did with him, for him, in his time with the organization. And if he can be back, he'll be back. But he's got to take care of himself, and there's a business side of this that everybody kind of understands. Bobby, we kind of already talked about. I think Dante Fowler. The thing with Dante Fowler, I think, is going to be, how much does he value himself versus how much the team values him. He only played 500 snaps last year, compared to like Frankie Louvu, who played over 1,000. Bobby Wagner played over 1,000. So as linebackers go, really it was a two-man show with Dante Fowler coming in, on passing downs, pass situations, all that stuff. So, if they view him as more of a role player, then they're going to want to pay him like that. But if Dante views himself as an every down impact player, he's going to want to be paid that way, right? So they got to fill that gap if they can at all.
Okay. And then what about some of these other players in defense? There's a lot of guys, including you got 4 more defensive backs. And it looks like mostly, role players. Which one of these guys do you think are the most important for them to bring back?
Honestly, if you're going to bring anybody back, you're probably looking at a veteran like Sheldon Day, a defensive line veteran. That's a guy that you really want to kind of, I wouldn't say he did a whole lot of great things, obviously, up front, right? But he was able to get a lot of early penetration when he was in. You look at the defensive line as it is, Johnny Newton, not exactly blowing the door off the building as far as expectations are concerned. Deron Payne has been he had a great contract year before he got his current deal, and he's kind of regressed back to how he was before the contract year, which is always disappointing. Jonathan Allen looks like he's probably going to be on the move. So, given what you have there, the D-line room, when you come on the clock, round 1, round 2, like you need certain things, and you're not going to be able to fill all those gaps with one or two draft picks. So I think bringing a guy like Sheldon Day back is very important. Noah Igbenogany, I think he did a very serviceable job as a slot corner when Mikey Sainer still moved outside. I don't know how much they desire bringing him back. To be quite honest with you, Jordan Lewis, the Dallas Cowboys starting slot defender, is projected anyway to become a free agent. So if he hits the open market, it would make a lot of sense for them to go after him. That would allow them to keep Mikey Sanders still outside along with Marshawn Lattimore, keep Jordan Lewis in the slot there, the way that he did it for Dallas, which he was the starter that Noah Igbenogany was behind before he left Dallas to come to Washington, right? So you're replacing one starter with your actual starter. And then going to the draft to get, look at maybe getting some cornerback depth, some young guys that you can develop and grow behind those three. But, I wouldn't hate to see Noah Igbenogany come back. I think, like I said, he did a serviceable job, but we'll see how that works out.
And is St. Juste, is his time up? What do you think?
Yeah. Benjamin St. Juste doesn't fit what the Commanders defense is trying to do. The biggest frustration with Benjamin St. Juste is a lot of the mistakes he made, he would make again and again and again. You can live with the guy making a mistake. The key is learn from it, fix it, don't do it again. And unfortunately, it just, as Ben kind of seemed to press to try to make up for past mistakes, he just made more of them. So I think he's gonna be another guy that was on the team before Dan Quinn and Adam Peters came in and will no longer be with the team.
You mentioned Allen. So speaking of cap casualties, do you believe he's going to be one of them?
Yeah, they gave John Allen permission to seek a trade. He asked for a trade. That's clearly all about security. He has no guaranteed money on his current contract, so he wants some guaranteed money. He wants more years probably tacked onto a deal. And, so I don't blame him for necessarily asking that. If they came to the table to ask the Commanders for some sort of an extension to give him some guaranteed money and they said no, then I don't blame him for asking for that. And the team, gracious enough to allow him to go out there and seek a trade partner. Was in the conversation with the 49ers for the trade for Deebo Samuel. Ultimately, the 49ers opted to not have John Allen involved in that deal. But it does look like the Commanders are trying to somehow, place some sort of like 5th round value on Jonathan Allen. So if a team like maybe the Cincinnati Bengals, who could use some D-line help, wants to give up a 5th rounder or 6th rounder for Jonathan Allen, then perhaps they can execute a trade. If they can't find a trade partner, then I do expect Jonathan Allen probably to be released before his roster bonus hits.
Okay. And we mentioned safety. So let's say for some reason Chin wants a bigger deal than what Washington's willing to offer. Forrest is also a free agent. Reeves and Butler are just guys. I mean, Reeves, I believe, is more of a special teams player, right?
All pro reload, all pro special teams guy.
So does that become, if Chin's not back, that becomes a pretty big potential issue? I mean, obviously, there's a gap right there with Chin. Are they okay with Quan Martin? Is it just a matter of just replacing Chin? Or do you think that they might want to bring in someone as well to push Martin?
Yeah, I mean, look, I know some people who aren't, super high on Quan. They feel like he didn't make enough splash plays. I kind of look at it, they asked him to be that last line of defense a lot, single high safety, deep coverage guy. And I think he did a very good job. And a lot of times, runs would break downfield and he'd be that last guy, the last defender and bring down the ball carrier. So I feel like Quan did a serviceable job, certainly not an all-pro, not a Pro Bowler at this point in time in his career, but not bad. Jeremy Chin is the thing about Jeremy Chin is he plays a very unique position, right? People call it the star, they call it the Buffalo nickel, whatever you want to call it. He plays a hybrid linebacker safety role for the Washington Commanders. And when he's down in the box, Percy Butler tends to fill in as the deep safety behind him if they do want one. And they don't leave Quan Martin up top. The problem with Percy Butler is he doesn't bring the thump or the tackling ability that Jeremy Chin does. So it's not a 1-for-1 swap. And, as much as the star position or, like I said, Buffalo nickel, whatever you want to call it, has gotten more and more prevalent in the National Football League, those types of players don't grow on trees and you don't just find them anywhere and everywhere. So that makes Jeremy Chin a little bit more valuable. However, it also makes his market a little bit thinner, right? Because not every team uses that. Like the Philadelphia Eagles don't have a spot for a Jeremy Chin, right? So like they're not going to go after him to be, their hybrid safety linebacker type of guy. So, it's a question of market, it's supply and demand, right? But yeah, if they lose Jeremy Chin, they absolutely got to find a way to replace him because they don't have another guy like that on the roster right now.
How is the draft capital for the team?
Draft is good. They've got their crop of day 1 and day 2 picks. Their 3rd round pick is Miami's by way of, I think, Philadelphia. They don't have any 4th or 5th round picks right now, so day 3 is going to get off to a little bit of a slow start. 1 pick in the 6th, 2 in the 7th. But of course, again, maybe they get back in the 5th round with a trade for John Allen or trade out of number 29 in the 1st round overall and net some more picks in this year's draft. There's always ways to add more draft capital if you want to as an NFL GM. But overall, I mean, they've got a decent amount of picks.
Okay. Special teams is wide open. So is this going to be like a completely new look special teams, or are there several guys they want to bring back?
Yeah, Tyler Rod is their long snapper. I think Tressway is going to end up coming back again. Another one of those veterans that probably it's just not a high priority deal to get done. You know what I mean? But I imagine Tressway will be on his way back to the team sooner rather than later. And then for the kicker position, they went through. I think they went through 7 kickers ultimately in the totality of last year. But the last 2 turned up to be 2 of their best ones. Austin Seibert and Zane Gonzalez did very good jobs for them. Unfortunately, both of them also had periods where they dealt with injuries. And Austin Seibert ultimately ended up on injured reserve and didn't come back. I would like to see the team bring both those guys back on a 1-year deal, low guarantees, things like that. Let them battle it out in training camp. Put one of them on the practice squad unless he gets signed by somebody else, and have the other one be your starter. But I think both those guys deserve an opportunity to come back and battle it.
Do they have a returner right now? Do they value McCaffrey as their like fallback option for both kicker and punt returner if they need to? And then, hey, if they happen to find someone, great, but that's not really a priority for them.
Yeah, we saw Luke get some kick return opportunities. I know in practice he fielded punts, never really got to see him do a lot of punt returning in game. Jamison Crowder was the punt returner, so he's a pending free agent. We'll see how that pans out. And then Austin Eckler was actually their second team All Pro kick returner, but he didn't even return kicks after he came back from the concussion until Olamide Zaccheaus unfortunately dropped the ball in some returns, and Austin Eckler started getting back there a little bit more. I think they have a decent amount of people back there, but you certainly, if there's a guy available, especially you look like late in the draft, if there's a dude who's just got explosive return potential, that's the kind of guy that you take a flyer on and see if you can't produce something with him.
Most of the key coaches are back. Are there any coaches at all that need to be replaced?
No, I mean, they lost their assistant special teams coordinator, brought in a new assistant special teams coordinator pretty quickly. A lot of guys getting interviews. If the Commanders have the success or even close to the success they had in 2024 in 2025, then I think you'll be looking at this staff losing, at least 3 coaches, if not more, including Cliff Kingsbury probably getting a head coaching job in 2026. But for right now, it looks like they're running it back for the most part.
Okay, let's go over the needs. I don't know if you've put something together yet as far as an actual top 5, or we could just go over the needs and maybe try to put in the list afterwards. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, right off the bat, top 3 or edge offensive line was receiver until the Deebo Samuel trade. I think receiver is still a top 5, need, but I think you probably move that down to probably that 5th spot. I think cornerback has to come up there. Defensive line has to come up there as well, especially with the, pending departure of Jonathan Allen. Look, Johnny Newton came in with a lot of hype and a lot of excitement. And don't get me wrong, like when I first saw him on the practice field after he got healthy again after that second foot surgery, looked explosive, looked really quick off the line. But unfortunately, when it came time to gaming, just didn't do a lot. You know what I mean? Deron Payne, we already kind of talked about him a little bit. So, that defensive line, the run game was the Achilles heel for the Washington Commanders last year. And it's not just because they played Saquon Barkley 3 times.
Yeah.
They need to get better there, and it starts up front. You know what I mean? Carl Davis is a guy who's on the practice squad, got elevated multiple times, including in the postseason. The reason he got elevated is because he's a run fitter. He's a gap eater. You know what I mean? He's a dude who just gets big in a hole, stays in that hole, and stays big. So would like to see him come back along with a guy like Sheldon Day, who's a little bit more quicker on the defensive line. But then you look, in the NFL draft, there's going to be options of guys who are just space eaters that maybe you go out there and take a day 3 pick on or something like that, and tell them just go out there and be a big dude on the defensive line. So I think those are your priorities.
Okay, so you said so edge, wide receiver, defensive tackle, and corner,
and O-line. Yep.
And O-line, and anything, and that would be tackle more than likely.
I mean, honestly, you can go a number of ways. With Sam Cosmi's injury, maybe you're looking for a guy that can fill in at guard, but could also slide half a tackle. Maybe you're looking for a true blue tackle. There's a lot of different ways you can go there. So just looking at offensive line and seeing if you can get better as a front 5 is the ultimate key. I think outside of center Tyler Biadasz, and Sam Cosmi again when he returns, I think anything's pretty much open.
Okay, and when do we expect Cosmi to return?
I mean, you can expect Cosmi probably around October, right? Typically, that type of injury takes 10 to 12 months to heal. It happened in early January. 10 months is right around October, November timeframe. We asked Adam Peters at the NFL Scouting Combine, the general manager, about Sam Cosmi, and specifically, I asked him, how much does Sam's recovery impact your offseason plans? And he honestly said it doesn't really impact it very much, and he's doing a really good job of recovering. He's in the building every single day, doing his rehab. And, he didn't go as far as to say, like, I think he'll be back sooner than you guys think he will. But look, Sam, very shortly after the injury, I mean, he was still around the locker room. We were still talking to him. He was in great spirits, and was really looking forward to just attacking his rehab. And he's got people around him. Jeremy Reeves tore his ACL in 2023, was able to come back in less than 10 months and have a really good year in his first year. Usually when you have a knee injury of that caliber, your first year back from it is pretty rough. But Jeremy Reeves was able to come back and do a really good job. And, the training staff there in Washington helped him do that as well, and determination and all that. So, if there's a guy that can come back from that injury in 9 months, I would not put my money against Sam Cosmi being that guy. So, we'll have to see.
Who is the top young, speaking of, because I want to go into one more thing, and that's some of these young players on the team that might be developing, players that maybe not fans outside of Washington may not realize are one off season away from really making a name for themselves as a regular. So what do we see here as on both sides of the ball as a couple of players, not necessarily high draft picks, of course, but players in general, young guys who you think are ready to take another step?
I mean, I think a guy like Jalen Holmes is really interesting, and he's a pending free agent. But if the Commanders decide to bring him back, he's a guy that he played similar. He played much fewer snaps than Cleveland Farrell. Cleveland Farrell also a free agent pending. The defensive end that played opposite of Dorrance Armstrong Jr. as the starter. Jalen Holmes came in, got some reps in that position where Cleveland Farrell plays, and their stats are actually very surprisingly similar considering how many more snaps Cleveland Farrell really played than Jalen Holmes did. Now, it's not a 1-for-1, right? You can't say, well, Jalen Holmes played 3 times the snaps. You have 3 times the snaps. That's stats. That's not how it works. But there clearly is some potential there. Now, Jalen is not necessarily young, depending on, he's about 30. So depending on your mark of young, but he is a guy that I think if they do let Cleveland Farrell walk, which is what I think will happen. If you bring in, say, a guy like Myles Garrett, you bring in Jalen Holmes to be his backup, or say you go into the NFL draft and you draft, a guy like JT Tuipulotu out of Ohio State. Like he's a guy who maybe comes in to be your starter, but Jalen Holmes can rotate to keep guys fresh. Like he's a guy that I think could make a bigger impact on this team and become more well-known for his impact if he gets another run at it and actually gets to be, because he joined this team, I want to say in October of last year. So if he actually gets a full training camp and preseason and all that stuff with the team, then that impact could even go up. And then offensively, I mean, Luke McCaffrey, I think, has to be the guy that a lot of people are going to look at, still relatively new to the wide receiver position, but getting, I don't know that, the general outsider kind of understands really the pace of life as a first-year NFL player. Like your college season ends and you don't get a break. You go straight into draft preparation, all-star game season if you go to an all-star game, and then you're doing the NFL scouting combine, you're doing pro days, and then, you're getting ready for the NFL draft. You're still working out, and you're trying to get an idea of, who might take you, who might not take you. As soon as you get drafted, it's celebrate with the friends and family, sign your contract or don't sign your contract, start negotiating your contract, and then get your butt to rookie minicamp. Then it's veteran minicamp. Then it's total minicamp. Then you got that break where it's like, now it's time to study the playbook, right? It's not vacation time. Now I'm just nose deep in the playbook, trying to get my reads, my checks, my calls down, and my signals, my motions, all this other stuff. Then boom, you come back and you're in training camp, and it's just, balls to the wall from there. So Luke McCaffrey, this like right now is really his first time he's had the opportunity to kind of breathe since he left Rice. So all those lessons of being an NFL receiver, what he went through, what he talked to Terry McLaurin about, et cetera, those things are going to really start to settle in now. That's why you would usually expect these year 2 jumps. And then, of course, his father, Super Bowl champion multiple times, Ed McCaffrey, right? His brother, Christian McCaffrey, like he's got a great support system around him to help him kind of take this first year of education and knowledge, turn it into second year production. So I think Luke is a guy that a lot of people, I mean, honestly, a lot of people were already looking for him to produce really well as a rookie. I think they're going to look for him even more as a second year player.
Are they set right now at running back? Do they just believe that as long as there's a healthy unit, that they're going to be fine with Robinson and Eckler and Rodriguez? Or do you think that at some point with this deep draft class as it is with running backs, and of course every year, that they might use, I know, like you said, no 4th, no 5th, but that they might value one of those picks later in the draft?
Yeah, I think running back is certainly on the table. The thing about running backs, and, you look at the San Francisco 49ers, they've had a lot of running backs come through there since 2017, which is when John Lynch came there as the GM and Adam Peters went there as the assistant GM. Wasn't really until Christian McCaffrey came around that they were like, okay, now we got to pay a guy. Now we got to, open up the wallet a little bit. And honestly, the way that they're going right now, trading Deebo, potentially trading Brandon, I mean, those days may be coming to an end as well, But the truth of the matter about the NFL and the running back situation, I know this year, a lot of free agent running backs, Saquon, Derrick Henry, made really big impacts for their teams. Certainly David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit are giving a big case for NFL teams to really covet running backs. But I think overall, you see the Green Bay Packers let Aaron Jones walk. They bring in Josh Jacobs on a deal that was less than they would have paid Aaron Jones, and they get pretty much the same, if not better, running production out of that deal. The Minnesota Vikings then take on Aaron Jones for less than he would have made in Green Bay, and they were pretty happy with what they got out of him. It doesn't help the re-signing market for running backs as much as it helps the free agent market for running backs, right? And with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler both entering contract years this year, I think the Washington Commanders would be almost criminally negligent if they didn't go draft a running back. You got to have a guy in the chutes that you're kind of projecting and developing behind him, because the fact of the matter is most NFL franchises aren't going to pay a running back a second contract unless he's one of those top guys. And, truth be told, right now, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler is not one of those top guys. So if you can go get a Trevion Henderson on day 2 out of Ohio State or something like that. Look, the Commanders had an official formal meeting with Ashton Genty at the NFL Scouting Combine, who was projected to go way too high for the Commanders to even think about drafting. Yet they had that meeting with them. And look, some of that could also be they think he might go to Dallas. So we want to get into your psyche a little bit. We want to find out who you are, because maybe you're going to be a division rival. Who knows? Yeah. There's a lot of reasons these people do what they do. Yeah. But I think clearly there's at least some interest and some idea that they might go that direction at some point. Just depends on who's there and when they're there and if they're the right fit.
Yeah, you never know with a guy like Genty, running backs, especially it might hurt Genty, it might hurt Hampton that the class is so talented and deep this year. Yeah. Because some of those teams in the first round might decide, well, we can go get one a little bit later, but this is one who believes that one of those guys can be a major game changer, and then they'll deservedly go at that spot. All right, so that's going to wrap it up. Once again, you have a show 5 days a week. We've got a link in the description for that. And I'm assuming right now, this time of year, Dave, it's all going to be about the draft and free agency. Anything specific that you're working on?
Yeah, it's all about team building. Obviously the Deebo Samuel trade was big. We did an episode over the weekend on that. Mock Draft Monday was all about the impact that Deebo makes on needs and how the new draft look because of that. It incorporated a Jonathan Allen mock trade in there as well to see if you can get that 5th round pick back. All those things. And we'll continue moving forward on, the fit and the offense and how it shifts, needs and requirements down and all that stuff and contract situations and everything. Just, it's all about team building, who you can bring in, who you might get rid of, who you might draft, just nonstop.
Yeah, it's a fun time of year. No question about it. We want to thank you as always for joining us and giving us the scoop on the Commanders. And then we look forward to talking to you after free agency and the draft because there's going to be a lot of newness to the Commanders. And I'm sure the fans are looking forward to that, as every fan base is. So again, thanks a lot for doing this, Dave.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
You got it. And again, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And we'll be back real soon with another interview as we get ready for free agency and the draft here on the Our Lads Football Network.